Many people correctly interpret the CCP of China as being very authoritarian, autocratic, and as a consequence, being able to do things that, frankly speaking, no Western government could ever do. For example, at the beginning of the pestilence, in the place of its origin, they completely shut down Wuhan, the city in China, and they were able to do that because it's the CCP. So it's very autocratic and authoritarian. But just because the CCP has a degree of influence and power that is not comparable in the West doesn't mean that it's omnipotent. It can't do everything. And it's in this frame that I wish to talk about an article, which I'll be posting in Lowbar, referencing the loss of traditional masculinity in China. And there are a couple of angles to talk about this from. Well, let's first talk about the contrast that you'll find in the West. When people in the West talk about loss of masculinity or men becoming girly boys or becoming boys in general, it almost always emanates from women. And to the degree that it doesn't, it's usually some sort of collaborative effort, in the sense that people are hearing the lamentations of the women, and these lamentations drive them, push them to discuss it. And what do you hear usually? Men are just boys, they're no longer men anymore, they're failing in showing their masculinity. It's a complaint coming from women that men are just not up to scratch for their dating and reproductive needs. Now, that is the most common form of the West. But one form you almost never hear, which is the converse, is what we're going to be talking about now, and that is the interpretation and perception in China of a loss of masculinity has very little, at least officially, to do with the complaints of women. Of course, women there complain. Some of you might know the famous Chinese song, "No Car, No House," and implying that a man who doesn't have these things is not really a man. It's a classic, in case you haven't checked it out. But the article I'm referencing and the general thrust of the complaint is based on the wider social net of government. It is a government complaint. It is a societal complaint that Chinese men allegedly are no longer masculine enough. And so, as a consequence, they are really worried about the future of their men in China. Again, this is distinct from women complaining about men not measuring up in terms of the dating scene or reproductive drives. So what exactly is the basis of the complaint coming from the government and larger society? Well, men are no longer masculine, of course, but what does that really mean? Well, in the context of the government, the CCP, and traditional masculine values, it simply means that men are no longer pliable and useful enough to the state. Because there are two angles you have to look at it from. The first angle is the purely gynocentric angle, the angle that women come from, and that angle is this man a suitable mate? Is he a good provider? Blah, 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 the usual stuff. Is he hot enough? Whatever. That's one side. The other side of the coin, though, is men are the disposable sex. Men are not as valuable as women because women are the limiting factor in reproduction. And so their value is found in the things they do, but also in the fact that they can be sacrificed rather easily. But when you have a population that is A, not necessarily conforming to that role, and B, as a consequence, isn't even capable of executing those activities, which is to say, being soldiers for the state, enlisting in the army, being part of the defense of the country, etc., then alarm bells will be rung in the respective country, in this case China, because China needs to make use of its manpower as opposed to its woman power, and men have always been the disposable sex. In this regard, the complaint is not that they're not necessarily good partners for women, although you have that too, but rather they're just not pliable peons for the state, and that is a problem. And there's another angle to talk about this from, and that's very simple. The fact that the CCP is not all-powerful means that we live in an increasingly globalized society and culture, and wherever you might be in the globe, things are going to seep in. It is absolutely impossible, barring a few exceptions, to prevent some of these cultural things from entering, unless China wants to become North Korea, which it certainly doesn't. It's shown the opposite. It's become very capitalistic, very much interested in investing. China is both metaphorically and otherwise traveling across the globe, investing in countries in Africa and South America, et cetera, et cetera. So they're very adventuresome, and they also want to invest and make lots of money. And because of that, they are de facto part of the globalized economy. And in a globalized economy, people at the ground level are going to be exposed to things and ideas that maybe the CCP doesn't approve of. Now, of course, they try to censor, they try to cut out content, they try to prevent a lot of these things from seeping in, from getting in. But ultimately, it's impossible to completely prevent it from happening, unless, of course, you want to run a state like North Korea, in which case we know very little about North Korea, but they probably don't have these influences. And if you recall, not too long ago, I covered the topic of a very popular female bot in China that a lot of guys, Chinese guys, like and are quite taken by. And so I think it's, in a way, trying to run a dangerous game of balance. On the one hand, the government is not in a position and probably can't ban all the sorts of technology that are flowing into China, as well as the cultural influences, K-pop, video games, you name it. On the other hand, they also want to make allowances. They realize, as I said in the earlier video, that you don't want an entire population of disgruntled males, and so you have to allow for certain types of bots to exist. And if men find them appealing and they're preoccupied with them, that's good. So you have to walk that balance. So it's a balancing act at the end of the day, and the CCP really needs to walk that tightrope, and it's not easy. And so I don't know how they're going to succeed. The suggestion in the article is that men need to become teachers more often, and there are too many female teachers, or they need to receive more physical education, et cetera, et cetera. Who knows if that's really going to be an influence? I personally don't think that's the case. I think that we're all being affected by a new type of culture that is found everywhere globally, and you can't simply have government mandates to reverse that. To the extent you do, it's going to seep in anyway, the second people become aware of it and are interested in those types of things. Now, as for myself, I don't hold men to some weird standard. They want to be traditionally masculine, they want to be whatever. I don't really care. That's the whole point of going your own way. You do what you want to do on your own terms. But obviously, when you want to keep tight control over a situation, this is not very beneficial. But frankly speaking, that's what China has opened itself up to. Yes, they can maintain all the controls they want, but they will still be exposed to the global world. Sure, they might block YouTube, but you're still going to have Chinese exchange students. You're going to have all these people that are participating in a global information network, and that is changing the game fundamentally and changing everything between the sexes, and also, it seems, changing the nature of the pliable, obedient soldier in China. I wonder what they're going to do. Whatever it is they're going to do, I don't think it's going to be very pleasant, and it probably won't be very effective. And why? Because culture precedes politics and government, and that simple fact will make it impossible long-term for the CCP to retain tight control over the situation. Eventually, it will slip. Eventually. Thanks for tuning in. Please like the video, subscribe if you've not yet done so. Please hit the bell icon to be informed of forthcoming videos. And as always, may the gods watch over you. If I'm still alive, I'll check you out later. Take care. If you liked this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you enjoy my content, please consider making a donation or becoming a patron. Thanks for watching.